Very good morning, and we are pleased to have all of you here with us this morning. I am Anton Thayalan, the Chief Evangelist for Luminary Learning Solutions, and I will be the voice of the webinar this morning. We welcome you yet again to the Reset and Go webinar series, designed with the anticipation of getting everyone back on track in terms of mindset. Setting the right precedence is important for the entire series, and this is our disclaimer. We are not here to discuss the obvious. We're not here to dissect the impact. We are here, however, to contemplate the way forward. This is the basis of the series, and tomorrow, the 5th of May, will be the finale, which will augment the topics discussed over the past 2 weeks with the view of carving a clear way forward. For more details, stay tuned till the end. We will commence our webinar shortly, and as usual, and for those who are joining us this morning, here are some house rules. If you do wish to ask a question, please use the chat option at any point during the session. Similar questions will be clubbed together. And as always, the format of the webinar discussion is fueled by your Q&A. So keep those questions coming in. The topic of the session today is emotional well-being and support during a time of crisis. Well, as Aristotle, humans are however, words such as social distance, quarantine, and isolation, in stark contrast, imply separation from the very essence of what makes us human. We all subscribe to society on varying levels. So what does it really mean for us to be in conflict with human nature, as it were, working against years of evolution? How are we coping? Actually, let me rephrase this. How are we supposed to be coping? And what can be considered emotional well-being during this time? Well, helping us shed some light on this existential crisis is our guest this morning, Shanuki Alwis, brand purpose consultant and community crisis first responder. Bani Chandrasena, head of inclusive diversity, London Stock Exchange Group. And Nivendra Udman, counseling psychologist. Our host this morning is Numica Pereira, trainer with Luminary Learning Solutions and human resource manager for DataVale Lanka Private Limited. Flying under the radar this morning is none other than Vidushanatha Vitarana, founder and destiny architect of High Five Consultancy and Luminary Learning Solutions, in full stealth mode this morning, doing his part in executing the webinar behind the scenes. Once again, thank you everyone for joining us, and Numica, over to you.
Thank you, Anton. Good morning, everybody. I would like to give a warm welcome to everybody who is logged in from Sri Lanka, as well as wherever they may be. And before I would like to thank our guests today as well, Shanuki, Bani, and Nivendra. Thank you for joining us. And let's get on with it. So, like many people, I was also working from home before this whole thing happened. And it was a normal thing, right? Basically, everyday thing. Once a week or maybe once a month, working from home was a practice. And this new crisis happened. And things have basically, gone to a different level altogether. And everybody's at home. My husband is at home. The kids are at home. And it's, entertainment at its best. With my 2 kids, 2 boys, one going to school, and homeschooling is, it's entertaining. With that, we still have to meet the deadlines of work, as well as manage the situation, do the groceries that comes near to the house, as well as, do the laundry. Everything is there. So the situation has turned around. And especially we can't actually go out, right? We can't go for our coffees or the luncheons or the dinners. Everything is basically slowed down. So in a situation like this, how are we managing our emotional well-being? So my first question will be, how do you know that you are not balanced out or you're not in the right place emotionally? And what kind of symptoms would actually tell us that we are unbalanced? That's my first question. Nivendra, would you like to start on that?
Yeah, sure. Morning, everyone. So, to answer the question that was just thrown, I think there are lots of different signs that will tell us as human beings that our emotional well-being is not where we want it to be. So I think, especially during a crisis of this nature, you will find a lot of people struggling with kind of regulating their emotions. So you might be feeling different things like frustration, anger. Some people might be feeling guilt. Other people might feel intense sadness. So there might be a mix of a lot of emotions people might be feeling at this time. And I think some of the key things to watch out for is if you're finding yourself really being reactive at this time emotionally, so snapping at people, getting very irritable, if you're crying for, I mean, no reason, or if you're finding yourself crying frequently during the day, if you're finding your mood really low throughout the day. So it's not an hour or two, and because that's normal, all of us would go through that. But if you're finding your mood being low constantly for a day or two or three, I think that's something you really need to pay attention to. And one of the first signs that often we identify when we are not doing well is that it affects our sleep, right? So if people are not finding it easy to fall asleep, or if you find yourself waking up in the middle of the night and not being able to go back to sleep, or sometimes feeling really exhausted and tired in the morning when you wake up, almost as if your body is just completely glued to the bed, not being able to get up. So those are things you might want to watch out for. I think eating also is important to consider. So if you're finding yourself not having that much of an appetite suddenly, not feeling like eating as you normally do, or if you're finding yourself going into eating a lot of junk and sugary food suddenly, which is not your usual diet, I think that's a sign that your emotional well-being might be compromised. So having said all of that, it's important to understand that whatever all these things are, they are normal for us to feel at this time, but it's that time when we know when we need some support is when it starts to happen very frequently, and it lasts for a long time, right? So that's when I think your alarm bells need to start ringing and you need to know that you need to get some help. So that, Numica, I think those are some of the things we might want to watch out for.
Thank you very much,
Yeah.
Nivendra. And Shanuki, what do you think? How would you be aware of this kind of, emotions coming your way? Have you noticed this kind of thing with you, or how has that happened?
Yeah, I think all of us have been through it one way or the other. This I'm someone who's like notoriously bored if I don't have a million things to do, right? The fact that I've been stuck in the house whilst I'm enjoying like this vacation that I never got to have in 21 years of a career, it's also something that puts me off balance, which I agree with a lot of people out there in the corporate world who are used to cranking those hours in. There are the workaholics out there. There are the ones who have sort of, for me, it's a comfort to be in an office space because you're away from the distractions of the home. And you really feel more productive when you're in the right environment for it, right? And there's that sort of that need to get work done. But the fact that now that you're not able to have that space can put you off a little. And that's happened to me. I mean, I've started becoming extremely lazy, very lethargic, very indecisive. There's a huge demotivation to actually sit at a workstation and do work. So you find yourself having to like self-motivate quite a lot, and that can be a challenge if you're not someone who's sort of trained enough to be aware this is what I'm going through and these are the sort of tools and things that you can use, which not a lot of people have that privilege of that knowledge. It can be very upsetting, because whilst you understand that you want to get work done, there's something that's stopping you from doing it as fast as or as effectively as you want it to. And then that sets up these anxieties of, I'm not going to get this done. That creates this kind of learned helplessness where, okay, I'm failing. Of course, there's a lot of stress in terms of, now, those of you out there who are sort of working for companies, you're on pins right now because companies are doing these furloughs and layoffs, and you don't know what's happening with the organization, because the organization also sometimes doesn't know what's happening. So there's a lot of, again, there's a lot of nervousness, right? And that's not helping the work that you have to do, because you don't know whether somebody's going to give you a call and say, okay, we don't need you anymore, or we have to do some cutbacks. So yeah, I think there is plenty of valid cause for a lot of anxiety. There's plenty of demotivation that will happen. And there are things you can do to kind of shift your perspective and help yourself. I think Nivendra has said this many times on many sessions, like it's for us to try and weigh out what are the things that are in our control, what are the things that are out of our control. And when we realize the differences between the two, at least there are things that we can control that can positively change our status quo. And one of the biggest things that we can control and we must learn to control is ourselves. That is within our control. So yeah.
Thanks, Shanuki. So I would like to then ask Bani this question with regard to people or teams facing this kind of emotional well-being overwhelmment emotionally. How do managers, or how do they understand it, and if they're going through an emotional issue, and how would you like to the signs you would basically be looking into from your end?
So if I look at it from a corporate perspective, we've tried to look at it from both sides. It actually does start with yourself, as an employee or a person, before you kind of think of your company or your manager, etc. So I think a lot of the things that we've tried to do to help, and I think a lot of companies can try to do this, is before we go classifying it into the category of mental health, etc., is engagement. I find, and I'm talking from personal experience, the first week for at least working people like us, first week was really great. We thought it was a great holiday. I had my son with me, but after 1 week that really became a little bit more exhausting. That's when I think at least myself, I started looking at myself, looking within, and then I started realizing I had no structure. I was waking up whenever I felt like it. I realized later on that if I had the sun in the morning, it makes my day and my mood a lot better. So I think there is a little bit of exploring as individuals, people should be doing instead of running for any sort of expert support immediately. And we were also mindful of that, because at LSEG we do offer all those services for people to talk to experts, etc. But we felt giving some structure or helping people with some structure would be the first way to get people focused, because we didn't expect people to be focusing on work all the time, even though they seem to be sitting in front of the computer all day. So kind of helping them break that, so that we help them compartmentalize, if I may say that, so that I make space for my child, I make space for my work, I make space for my cooking, I make space for my home chores. That way you're bringing some order, maybe in a world right now that feels a little chaotic. If I were to answer it from a manager's perspective, what I feel we are trying to help our managers with, and what would be really useful for managers, I think it was relevant even before COVID, to be fair, is for managers to be a little bit more aware and observant about behaviors in their team, changes in moods, changes in how people are working or productivity, and just to be aware of that, to try and help a conversation. I think it's not fair to put all of the efforts on the managers, because it's a lot.
Yeah.
And it's not, I mean,
And the managers also
have their,
need,
exactly, they have their own
things.
stress to deal with. But as a manager, one way to try and, I feel, improve it is to be a little bit more conscious, be aware of your team, and not to dive into anything, but once you see differences, then at least you go ask for help. If it's a company that does look at well-being and all of that, reach out for towards that. If there are other options like hotlines to call, there are ways to get help, but you start with being a lot more observant within as well as externally. I would think that would be the best place to start.
Of course. But I agree. I mean, it has to come within yourself to be that aware about yourself, and that's the most important thing about, being emotionally sound, I guess. But I guess most people don't understand that point, and that's something that they need to, learn, I guess, in time and gradually with the information they get. So one of the other things is, like, if I am an employee and I think that I have this kind of, I'm going towards emotional breakdown, and I think I can't, tolerate it, or I'm feeling overwhelmed about it. How do we, talk to somebody, or vocalizing it? How do we get there? That's where I think lots of people struggle with, and I think that's where we, need, because most of the people don't know how to say that they actually have a problem. They just get irritated, like, the more or less the symptoms that Nivenda was talking about, but they don't actually vocalize it so that somebody can actually help out. They just react to it, right? How do they go to that? And this is actually a question from the audience that came out, so I'm adding, this is so that's where we are coming from. So how do we go there? How do we vocalize it? How do we ask for support? Shanuki, do you want to take it in, or Nivendra? That's okay, Nivendra, go ahead.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
maybe you can start.
I just want to say that as a culture, we've over the years we've had difficulties in vocalizing what we feel, mainly because our language also doesn't allow us to, right? So in English, we have so many words to describe emotions, to talk about what we feel. But if you look at the local languages in Sinhala and Tamil, the vocabulary is very limited to talk about how we feel. So what I really want to say is, it's not always the individual's weakness or fault or problem that they're not able to articulate or verbalize what they feel, because that's something we haven't been taught. That's something, so emotional literacy is not something that we are geared with right from school days or even at home, right? So I think maybe, yeah, so like you said, we might have to relearn or learn again on how to talk about what we feel. So in terms of approaching someone and talking to someone about what we are going through, I think it's important that we understand that we can do it in small steps, right? It doesn't have to be one go at where you just tell everything that you're feeling to someone, because that can be difficult to do for someone who's not used to it. So it can be in small steps, that maybe you approach someone you can trust and that you're comfortable with, maybe at your workplace or otherwise, and maybe share gradually what you're going through, right? And I think something that I've learned throughout the years is that making eye contact with someone and just saying that I need help is a very powerful way to relieve pain that you're going through, right? So that can be even done through a video call if you're not comfortable sitting face to face with someone, right? So I think little things like that can be really helpful in order for us to express ourselves, or else we can even do it in writing. We can email, right? We can email or we can text if that's something we are more comfortable. Shanuki, what are your thoughts? Yeah.
Well, I'm just again going to come at it from a work corporate perspective. Okay, then Nivendra knows this very well, that I'm somebody who will never ask for help. And I don't like this feeling of vulnerability at all, even though I'm crashing and burning and somebody actually like proactively asks me, how are you? I say, fine. right? So there are people like me out there as well. When we're not fine, we don't like to show. And that is a problem when we're in a working environment. Also, we're a little nervous to expose our vulnerability. Because you're always worried. You don't want your colleagues to see you as the weak one. You don't want your management to see you as someone not being able to cope, because we all have those insecurities that this could potentially affect the way people look at how professional or capable we are. And that's very normal. That's very natural. I'd like to think I'm not abnormal in that. One thing that I do, or rather I did, because I made the unfortunate choice of resigning from my organization just before COVID hit. So I'm like, but before that, let's assume I was still working with my team. I'm still in contact with them, where you do this as a manager or as a colleague. You probably have your set of friends and pals at work, right? And you probably, chances are, you're on a WhatsApp group or whatever it is. So my team and I are. So it's this just thing of keeping it casual, not making it too deep and profound or whatever, but somebody taking the initiative to just say, hey, quick health check. How's everyone feeling today? What's the mood? Are we sad? Are we tired? Are we, and you put it in a very non-threatening kind of, oh my God, this is not such a deep analysis or anything like that. And I found that works a lot, because also for managers, it depends on the relationship you have with your team. I would strongly advise that you work on it if you don't. Where you can also feel comfortable allowing yourself to be vulnerable with your team, because right now everybody is going through stuff, right? You don't have to look like you're the boss of everything and you're in control. If you say, I'm not feeling good today, guys, I'm a little bit, panicky, how's everyone else? That gives your team permission to express themselves also, because you haven't come from it from a Superman point of view, like nothing's wrong with me, everything's wrong with you. So then if your line manager or if your superior has actually felt okay to say they're not okay, that validates you also not feeling okay, and you being able to express like, okay, I don't feel motivated today, or I don't feel like working today. And just that quick health check can also mean a lot, and just like open that door a crack for them to further that conversation if need be. And if you feel like, okay, then somebody in your team, either your colleague or your subordinate, there's something might be a little off in those few words, then you can follow up with private conversations like, hey, what's going on? I'm here for you. And just to take that step forward and create the space for them to open up without expecting them to come to you like naturally if it's not in them. Just to let them know it's okay to not be okay.
If I may weigh in for a minute, I think what Shanuki is saying, what she's describing, is actually one of the skills as a leader, as a manager, you should be able to show, not only with mental health, in general, because that's how you actually build that bond with your team. And when you think of a corporate culture, that's exactly some of the things that you do try to bring into a culture, so that the stigma that Nivendra talked about when it comes to mental health could be one of the vulnerable topics that you can talk about, and make that the culture of you're not being judged, or you're not the kind of person who would judge if you hear those kinds of things. So these are the pieces when it comes to culture building in a company that becomes really important. And I'm thinking for companies who haven't really focused on these kinds of things, this is a great chance to actually bring this into it as a learning, and post-COVID to actually not drop it. Because the reality is everything that we're feeling here and the mood swings, all of that we have every day anyways. Yeah. It's just that it tends to be a little bit accentuated, or a little bit more enhanced. So I think this is just real world enhanced or put under a microscope. So if you want to look at it from a constructive point of view, this would be great to actually learn from this, take those tips, especially if you're in leadership in HR, to actually make sure that you actually bring this into the real world post-COVID, because post-COVID is going to be a new world anyways. It's definitely not what we had before. So, there are lots of ways to look at this constructively instead of doom and gloom.
If I may also chip in, I think we are asking people to reach out and talk about how they're feeling in the corporate sector, especially. So I think at the same time, we also have to need people ready to listen. So like Bani and Shanuki said, people need to know how to listen without judgment, without giving advice, right? And without trying to solve their problems, because really when people reach out, what they want is not for you to solve their problems or to fix it, but what they really want is just for you to help them relieve the stress or the pressure that they might be feeling. And most of the time they themselves would arrive at solutions to their issues themselves if someone is really deeply listening to them, right? So as much as there's a big narrative about self-care during this time, I think their self-care can't exist if there is no community care, right? So in a organization, it's really important for managers, for leaders to model community care as much as we model self-care, right? So for example, like Shanuki said, a daily check-in. If you start the morning with a check-in, so that it normalizes this conversation, so it doesn't make this huge. It doesn't. It reduces the mystery around it, right? It becomes a casual, normal conversation where you have a check-in every morning just before you start talking about work. Take a few minutes to talk about how people are feeling, right? So it becomes more normal to talk about these things. But I think as an organization, Bani, like you said, I think moving forward, if organizations haven't done this, I think it's really important to also train employees on how to listen, on what kind of things to say, what kind of things not to say, so that you become effective listeners to help your peers or your the people under you. So yeah, I think this concept of community care at a workplace becomes so very important at a time like
If I may just add one thing to what Nivendra said, I love everything you're saying, and it is also, to me, all of that advice is really good as parents as well. Because it's the same thing, because kids are dealing with it differently, and how they deal with it, and my natural tendency to want to jump down his throat is not necessarily the answer also. So I think as all this advice that we're getting as managers for our teams, I think we need to kind of extend to our kids as well.
Also, if you have elderly parents at home, you just assume that they are in control of themselves because they're the adults, but maybe not, they're not.
Exactly.
Yes, for sure. I guess every level, I mean, the age is not the, you can't say it's everybody's having the same kind of emotional breakdowns. And I think being the parents, the kids, the employees, all of those people are going through the same kind of situation, and they are feeling it. Everybody's feeling it. And I would like Bani said, like Shanuki put in as well, it's basically showing who you are truly as a human, right? And showing that emotions to everybody else makes them feel more comfortable with themselves to share. And I think bringing it into a corporate environment where you're not scared to say, this is how I feel about it. I had a bad day yesterday. Today I'm getting on with it. I took a leave. That kind of thing, where I'm like being transparent. And when it comes from the leadership, people look at them and then oh, she's also vulnerable. I mean, she's also human. And for me to be human and for me to have breakdowns is going to be it's normal, right? It's that kind of bond that creates that transparency, creates that bond, and that kind of honesty really makes people want to share and give their best as well as employees and as people. So I guess it's how human you are, right? And how human you show, without having a mask in front of you, just showing how truly you are, and that really makes that connection, that bond, so that you can go forward. And I think it's a very good initiative if corporates can, have that kind of thing to start off with. And I think
also, if I could just interject just a moment, the other thing that it does is, when you go through some mental wellness issues on your own, you do feel very isolated, right? Perhaps because of the inability to communicate it, or this feeling of nobody understands you. This kind of health check, or this kind of shared communication, not only does it create an environment for people to speak to you, but it also gives them that clear message: we are in this together. So you don't feel isolated in what you're feeling. Even if you choose not to express, you still know somebody else is going through it.
Yeah.
So it kind of validates what you're going through.
does.
So it makes you feel a little better. So that's the other sort of benefit of it.
Okay, so
Right.
now if you don't mind, I'm going to put on my manager's hat on, because I'm sure 100 people are going to ask that question of, okay, is it all hugs and kisses, and is life going to be like that?
No.
I don't know, the approach I would take as a manager, and the approach I think companies should do, is make that space where you do have check-ins, where you're trying to check in on the person when it comes to their feelings, how they're feeling, but you do draw the line saying, okay, we are talking about work separately. Especially, I mean, I think of our company because we hire a lot of young people, inexperienced people. So if you don't kind of help them with a little bit of structure also, and then the manager loses complete control of the meeting, that's not ideal also. So it is about, so I guess this is where management or the leadership comes in.
Yeah.
To be able to start, like you said, go with the vulnerability, get everybody comfortable, and that's really going to be good for actually coming up with good ideas, etc., in the meeting also. But then be able to stop it there and get into the meeting. But if you do see certain people are struggling more than others, make it a point later on to catch up with them separately and have maybe the one-on-ones, etc., because at the end of the day you have to balance them all.
Balancing it.
Which is the tough one, and which is what sometimes I think a lot of companies are afraid to dip their toe into this, thinking it's all going to be fluff and people are going to lose control. So I think I feel that's an important point, especially because life is both.
Yes, I hear, Bani. So it's half time and we just need to summarize. We are basically doing this session on emotional well-being and support. And in conversation with us today is Bani from LSEG, Shanuki and Nivendra. And we have actually covered very important facts at the first half. Basically, we covered of how you feel, how you need to know the warning signs, and we have gone into detail on how it matters on how you communicate as well as a manager and as well as an employee. So my next question will be, how do you become emotionally literate? Right? It's like, how do you learn to be aware of yourself so that you can know when you are getting there? How do you know that you're going towards the red mark, or and also one of the other things we need to know is, how do we teach that to our children? Both of these are from the audience, the questions that has come in. So I'm actually clubbing it together. So how do you know as parents? How do you educate them? How do you make sure that our younger generation is learning this? And how do you keep yourself also aware of it?
Could I just dive in at a start, because some of the things we do is on mindfulness, and then I'll let the both of you all take it on from there. Is that all right?
Okay, Bani. Yeah, go ahead, Bani.
So at LSEG, whenever we think of mental health, we think of it in two ways. We think of it as what I call preventative, and then actually dealing with it when you have a problem. With that in mind, we kind of dived into a CSR project also, which is Satipasala, where it is all about raising awareness and getting ourselves more mindful. And the Satipasala, the CSR we're doing, is actually mindfulness in schools. So the way at least I see it, and the way we have seen it in the company, is you start with actually, I don't know whether you would call it, Nivendra, you would call this self-care, where you learn through breathing, very basic exercises, to be more aware of yourself, your surroundings, even simple things like breathing, etc., because that then kind of brings you to the now, which kind of calms you down or gets you well, I don't want to say the word focus, but it brings you to the present. And I know I'm maybe not describing it in the best way, but 5 minutes of focusing on nothing but what is in front of you or what is here makes a huge difference in your mind state, to be able to then deal with or be aware of what the bigger problems are. From a school perspective, I mean, I do this with my son because he also tends to be somebody who gets really excited, is to actually sit down and just focus on things like breathing, focus on one thing. It's not the solution, but it definitely, I feel, is the first step towards being able to start being more self-aware and look within, etc. Sorry, I'm going to hand it over to Nivendra and they who are going to talk.
Yes, Nivendra.
Yeah, I think to answer your first question about how can we be more emotionally literate and how do we be more aware of ourselves, I think I fully agree with Bani. Mindfulness is something that's really, really powerful, a powerful way to do that. But you know, we have these different ideas about what mindfulness is, and we sometimes tend to club it with religion and spirituality, right? Which makes it puts people off sometimes. So I just want to make it clear that mindfulness is not anything to do with religion. It's a very secular practice that anyone can do, right? It doesn't have to be associated with that at all. So like, and it doesn't mean you sit in one place and meditate for hours and hours. That's not what it is about, right? But it's just about even 5 minutes can be more than sufficient for you to start with, you know, just focusing on your breath, counting your breaths, right? Or just looking at things that are in front of you, like Bani said, and just naming what you see, little things like that. Or if you're having a shower in the morning, just paying attention to what the water feels like in your body, right? When it hits your body, the pressure, the temperature, right? And if you're using shampoo or soap, to just smell and to notice what that's like. So those are all practices that you can do. That is mindfulness. You don't always have to sit in cross-legged and meditate, right? This meditation thing tends to put people off, especially children, right? So, and another thing is, I think, to really educate yourself about mental health, about emotional well-being. There's so much of material available online for people to read, which is simple. So it's not technical stuff. It's very simple. People can read online and educate yourself. And I think if you're working for a corporate or organization that pays attention to mental health, they will also have a lots of awareness programs and educational programs where you can really learn about all of these things. But I think mainly to just educate yourself, to read. There are so many books, and I think when it comes to parents and children, there are some lovely storybooks available online where you can teach children about emotions and about well-being, which are very simple and age appropriate, right? And I think just that parent holding space for that child to be able to talk about whatever it is, if they're at age where they can. And also the parent, most important thing is for the parent to validate whatever the child is feeling, even if it's something the parent doesn't agree with, right? So for example, if the child is really angry and throwing a tantrum because he or she is asked to stop watching TV at a particular time, the parent can say something like, okay, this is really difficult for you that we have to stop watching TV now. I get that, but we also have to talk about what else we can do with this time, right? So you're not covering the emotion up, or you're not pushing it away, but you're acknowledging and validating it. So for that, and the more the parents do that, the child really learns that it's okay to feel both negative and positive emotions, and it's okay to also talk about those things. So those are some of my thoughts. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Shanuki, you want to add anything, or?
So not really. I think Bani and Nivendra did a lot of it, and I don't want to repeat. But again, I can only sort of use my own personal experiences when I speak on these things, right? And I am permanently in denial about how I feel, as I already established, right? So emotional literacy has been something that I have had to learn very late in my life, and I think. That confusion can also lead to more anxiety because you just don't know what's going on with you. You want to say, I'm fine, there's nothing wrong, I'm fine. And we have this, right, that it's gonna go away, and I'll get over it or whatever. And you don't really describe it to yourself, and then you're confused as to why it's not going away, and why am I not feeling fine even though I'm fine, so when you have that sort of confusion, it's unfair for you to pressure yourself to try and figure yourself out, which is where then it's all right, and I understand that this is a pot calling a kettle black, but it's all right to ask somebody else, someone in the house, someone that you trust, or calling up a support hotline or whatever, and just saying, you know, this is what's going on in my head right now. I don't know what it is. Or you can check in with someone else saying, am I moody today? And they can say yes or no, and hopefully, you know, then they're not pranking you when they say that and putting you into a bigger fix. But yeah, it could be just that even, and that's just to kind of wrap your head around what's going on.
One question from my end also, it's I know that mindfulness is what we most probably talk about, and it's one of the most you know, popular and also one of the most effective ones, like Nivendu said. But in any other areas or any other you know, ways of actually that you can be more, you know, going into being more aware of yourself, except like, what would you recommend, Nivendra? Anything else?
Yeah, there are so many other ways. So one way is journaling, right? So just writing about what's going on in your mind or what you're feeling. So it doesn't have to be structured writing or beautiful grammar or handwriting, but it's just scribbling down whatever is going on, because taking some distance from your thoughts and looking at it from a distance externally can give you a different perspective, or it can help you just clarify and kind of untangle some of those things that you might be thinking or feeling. So journaling is something that's very useful. And if you're into things like art, you can draw, right? If you like to just paint or draw, you can do that same thing and express what you're feeling. So there's no one way. Talking is also helpful, like Shanuki said, to really just sound something off with someone, right? Besides that, yeah. So besides that, it's just.
Can I ask Nivendra a question? When it comes to talking, is there a difference between talking to strangers versus people you know?
A lot of people say there is, because talking to someone you know often doesn't allow the other person to be objective with you, because you're emotionally very bonded with that person, and you might also fear being judged or fear being
you don't want to expose yourself to somebody who's in your life, maybe.
Whereas with a stranger, the stranger might be more objective and they don't know your history to judge you. So you feel more comfortable talking to a stranger. That's why a lot of people elect to do that versus talking to family or close friends sometimes.
So one point that Nivendra brought out about journaling, I have to, like, you know, confess, I started journaling, I think, when I was very small, and I think how I managed my emotional journey to date was journaling. And I think it has been my, you know, way out of, you know, how I expose my emotions without, you know, talking to somebody, and it has really, you know, evolved. And now when I look at all what I've written, it sounds weird, but then, you know, most of it is you know, things that I really wanted to say to somebody, but I have. So it is a very, you know, open method of putting your emotions out, and it really helps. And I guess if somebody is listening to this, that's one of the best. I mean, for me, it has worked. And before mindfulness came into the picture, before I started working on my mindfulness exercises, that was how I think, you know, managed to stay sane for the years I've lived, I guess, from my teenage years. So we have another question from the audience, and this I think is very relevant also. With the situation right now, we have a lot of people who are in the front end. We have the army, soldiers, we have doctors, we have nurses, we have a lot of people who are in the front line that is basically doing, you know, the work in the current situation, and most of them are supposed to stay, you know, resilient and make sure that, you know, they cater and care for the others. In a situation like this, Sri Lanka is basically a country we don't share emotions, you know, as much as we are supposed to, right? And we are, you know, even in the way that we portray ourselves in dramas to movies, it's like, you know, we are not the most, you don't see the whole, you know, men getting emotional and that kind of thing as much as other cultures in Sri Lanka. And my question for you all will be, you know, how do you be in a place like that? I'm not bringing it on the gender, but I'm saying on the position or the, you know, the job that they're doing. How do you stay strong, and how do you manage your emotions in a situation like that?
Shanuki, you want to?
Go ahead,
Okay.
Shanuki.
Right. So obviously, again, disclaimer, I am not the mental health practitioner that Nivendra is. I have been trained by Nivendra. And I will also just go into things that I have discovered in working with people in situations like this, especially, but I can come at you from a corporate level. Again, how I do it with sort of business environments. This thing of needing to be strong all the time is a complete myth that we need to bust. Okay, and as a society, first and foremost, yeah, I will go into how we can self-manage ourselves, but at the same time, it's okay to not be okay needs to become a mantra in this part of the world, because I think this whole expectation of having to be resilient at all times and put on that face is again what causes a lot more of the depression, about not being able to sort of, even when you're breaking, you can't let anyone know you're breaking because there is a social and official expectation that you can't break. And I think we saw this a lot with our community crisis team last year during the Easter Sunday attacks, where, you know, we came into contact with a lot of people like paramedics and, you know, medical service people. And I believe even with this COVID situation, Nivendra has been talking to doctors who are all going through a lot. And they are all going through like quite a lot of stress and anxiety. And these are human beings with families and with sort of valid concerns in their lives as well. So much so that, you know, we did these, I think we learned about doing these things called debriefings for paramedics and stuff like that, where they also have the chance to outlet, and they also come into a space of people who say, hey, it's okay, you can talk to us, you know. So first and foremost, society also needs to get on this bandwagon of not expecting these people to be superhuman all the time. That said, it's kind of like this concept of being a leader in an organization. While you can be vulnerable, you are also looked to for leadership. And sometimes if your leader is like falling apart all over the place, that's just going to unbalance everything, right? So there is a certain amount of resilience that you might have to fake in times, you know, especially in times of crisis where you don't have the luxury of time to unpack and, you know, work on yourself. So for that, now the faking thing is a completely different theatrical trick altogether. But there is this process, and this was actually created in the United States by the forces. Actually, they do this with the Navy SEALs and all on training mental health, so mental resilience. There are various processes, but one of the ways in which they build is, it's called an ABCD process, and this is a self-management process. This is for yourself, right? And of course, it can happen in a guided situation also, where, you know, either your leader or your counselor or whoever can guide you through this. Where if you take a post-traumatic event, where you've gone through something, for instance, like COVID-19, put us all like on a back foot and wondering what's going on. Nobody saw this coming. So it's a crisis of sorts, where you sit down with someone or you sit down with yourself and you go through A, B, C, D. A is identifying what is this adversity, A for adversity. So what happened, right? What is it that happened? And we kind of just note that down. B is what is your belief towards what just happened. So your belief is, how am I feeling about it? You don't have to talk about it to anybody else if you don't want to, but how am I dealing with what just happened? So when you're putting these things down, you're actually creating a kind of a detached game plan view of it, and you're able to sort of mull over it a little more effectively than trying to sort it out in your head.
Yourself, yeah.
So C is, what is the consequence of how I feel? for instance, if you have a range of emotions that you're going through, okay, this thing has happened, the adversity has happened, this is my belief towards it. Now I know how I'm feeling about it, but what is the consequence of this? If I continue to allow myself to feel like this, what is the outcome that is possible, right? So if I am angry and frustrated and I continue in my anger, what is the result? So then you're actually acknowledging to yourself that this might not be the best form of action right now, right? And then the D is to dispel the unrealistic beliefs. So it's basically that, okay, so what right now, given the situation and given the role I need to perform, is it realistic for me to continue feeling or behaving in this way, or do I need to stop now? So it's kind of a self-schooling thing. So that's just in a crisis situation. I'm not saying that this is how you should be doing it all the time and just submerging or keeping your feelings to yourself. At some point, you need to address them. At some point, you need to get the help you need. But in a professional capacity where you're supposed to be handling a crisis and when you're supposed to be resilient, this is a good self-check, the ABCD. What am I feeling? What is going to be the result of me continuing to feel this way? So therefore, what do I need to change right now? And that once you identify, then you know, okay, what do I need to fake until I'm able to go and get the help I need? So that's just like, from me, that's kind of what I'm aware of doing.
This seems like a very good self-help concept to look into, right? Where considering the situation, they might not be able to reach out to somebody and they might have to deal with it themselves. And I guess, making sure that you check all these aspects really makes, you go through the whole thing and, realize it from your own perspective. I think that's a very good method to look into, right? And Nivenda, you want to add anything?
Yeah. Since Shanuki spoke about the Navy SEALs, I have another Navy SEAL story to share. So in the US, the Navy SEALs are put through a 1 week, what they call hell week, right? Because it's basically hell for 1 week to really test them and test their resolve. So one of the tests they are put through is called a drown proofing test, where their hands and legs are tied and they're pushed into a 9-foot pool.
Look at Bani's face.
They have to survive that for a given number of time, right? So obviously, if your hands and legs are tied, you're not going to be able to swim, which means you still have to figure out a way to survive. So a lot of people, what they try to do instantly is they panic and they try to swim, right? Or they try to somehow stay afloat, which very soon exhausts them. But for the people who are calm, what they do is they allow themselves to drown, right? And when they hit the bottom, they kick off again, they come back up, take a breath, and they go back down again. And then when they hit the bottom of the pool, they kick off, come back up, breathe. So what I'm trying to say is that resilience is not, sometimes we misunderstand this word, right? Resilience is not about being strong no matter what, but resilience is about facing adversity successfully while going through physical or emotional pain, right? So we have to acknowledge that there is pain or there is distress that we are feeling, but at the same time, we are doing certain things to keep ourselves or to get ourselves to bounce back and to bounce forward, right? So I think one thing that really helps with resilience is relationships, to invest in trusting, mutual, respectful relationships, right? And to take care of yourself. So that's your exercise, your sleep, your eating, all of that is a part of resilience. And then like what Shanuki described, just working around these sometimes dysfunctional beliefs we might have about ourselves or about other people. So all of these things help build resilience, right? And to have goals. So again, from a corporate perspective, to have goals as to what you want to achieve in the coming months, even though the situation is very uncertain, and to have a vision. So when you have a vision, I think that really builds a lot of resilience for you. Yeah. Shanuki,
I was actually going to talk about that as well, this whole fixating on a long-term plan. So if you think about in a month or in 3 months, what do I want to achieve? And when you fix on that, then you break it down to, okay, if I want to achieve this in 3 months, what do I need to do every week or every day to be able to get a step closer. So you kind of break it down to achievable tasks, and that gives you a goal. That gives you something to look forward to and something to work on without letting the sort of the demotivation and the thing get to your head. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the importance of humor. It is so important, especially for frontline workers, right, to be able to allow themselves to chill out at some point, right? You have your breaks or whatever, and humor is a fantastic way of just easing all the tension. And sometimes you might find, doctors do this, doctors and soldiers or whatever. It might even be, completely perverse, irresponsible and unnecessary humor, but it's just their chance to just detox, and that's okay. Sometimes even if we as a society also, we tend to be a little critical and judgmental about that. Like if somebody's cracking unnecessary joke, not that it given the setting, okay, if you have a couple of doctors who are dancing and doing something and people say, my god, they're doctors, they should be behaving like that, you have to understand that they're probably doing that because you need that. You need out. So just let them do that for themselves, as long as it's not harming anyone and it's not creating some sort of social attitude. It's like
just one point there I wanted to mention was, I know you all talked about frameworks, but another thing I think with our society, especially when you're talking about frontline and all of that, is this whole we bring it upon ourselves that we have to be there, and that me allocating a little bit of time for myself is not a good thing. And the reality is you do have to preserve yourself first in order to be able to help somebody, like in the airplane where you put the mask on to you first. So taking maybe 5-10 minutes, even if you're in the front line, to say, I do need to kind of preserve myself and be able to deal with myself first, I think is something, again, to some of the things you all said about our community and society about, they're here to help, they're frontline, so they do not matter. Those are the myths we need to break and say, no, I do need my 10 minutes, but the rest of the 10 hours, you've got me. So that kind of thing, us being brave enough to actually ask for it, give it to people who are not aware of it, I think is also important, in a very simple sense.
I agree. I mean, being selfish with regard to your emotions to make sure that you are in the right place is something that you really need to, consider and, be selfish upon in situations of considering your emotional health is very important. So before we wrap up, I just want to get some information from with regard to professional help that is available in Sri Lanka for people who are actually, going through this situation and, having emotional breakdowns and they need to reach out. How confidential is it, or what are the ones that you can recommend, Nivendra, from your end? Yeah.
So there are 4 telephone helplines in Sri Lanka, which is 100% confidential, and people can reach out to those numbers free, so they don't have to pay anything for that service. So one number is 1333, that's 1333, which is available 24 hours in all 3 languages, and it's toll free, which means your mobile phone or your landline doesn't get charged for the call. It's free, so you can talk for any amount of time. Even if you don't have credit on your phone, you can still make the call. Then we have Sumitra, which is the number is 0112 696666. 0112 696666 is Sumitra, which is available from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. People can reach out on that number. We have Shanti Margam, which is another organization, and the number is 0717 639898. Also available from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day. And finally, the National Mental Health Line, which is 1926 1926, is the hotline, available 24 hours, all 3 languages. So those are the 4 helplines that are available. People can reach out to them. Besides that, for this particular situation, a group of psychologists have come together to offer a service. It's called COPE Sri Lanka. COPE, COPE Sri Lanka. They can find their Facebook page, and through the page, they can book an appointment, a free consultation with a psychologist, where they can talk about anything that they want to talk about. So those are some of the services available. Besides that, there are private practitioners who are doing video consultation these days, so they can reach out to someone like that as well.
Okay, so one last question before we wrap up. It's what kind of advice would you all be giving to people who are not emotionally balanced right now, and you know, to get themselves back to where they're supposed to be quickly? If we can run around, Nivendra, if you want to start off, and then Bani, Shanuki.
Okay, so I think I really would say, like Shanuki said a little while ago, to really focus on what you can and can't control, right? And mainly to acknowledge what you're thinking and feeling. So not to push them away or to suppress them or to say that they are not important, but to really acknowledge them for yourself and say, I'm thinking this or I'm feeling that, and that it's okay to do that right now because it's a tough time for everyone, right? Yeah. So, and I think for a lot of people, you can try to use your body in order to gain emotional balance. So one way is breathing, mindfulness that we talked about, and there are a few other things, like simple things you can do while working just to ground yourself, right? So that is a part of taking care of yourself and managing your emotions, keeping balance. So simple thing like a brisk, doing this briskly, right? Just rubbing your hands together, or just with your fingertips pressing hard, so just so that your focus is there, right? So little things like that can really help bring your focus back and to be more grounded in what you're doing. Yeah, so that's what I really have to say.
Bani?
So I think I would say there are two things as tips. One is the whole mindfulness, and it does, like Nivendra said, there is mindful brushing, mindful walking, little things. It's just focusing on what you're doing and kind of cutting everything else out, or trying to. The whole idea is to attempt to do that, and that attempt alone I think is good enough. But saying all of that, I'm saying, you know, there are all these lines, there are all these people who are offering to help. Make the call. It doesn't matter that you're fine. It doesn't matter. It might be just a bad mood. It's okay. Make the call, have the conversation. You might not need to have another conversation again, but don't think it has to be a big deal before you make that call. The calls are available. There are people there to listen. There are people there to escalate it if needed. So, you know, trust the system and call.
And finally, Shanuki?
Yeah, I have three things. One is that whatever you're going through, if you're not able to sort of figure it out and deal with it, or if you're not able to solve it, one thing that you can do, which I do, if you have the powers of imagination, is to imagine that somebody really kind and wise and all-knowing, you're talking to that person. What would that person tell you? Because it's kind of shifting your perspective from how you are looking at a situation and looking at it from a detached point of view. So if there was someone amazingly, you know, knowledgeable and calm, how would they talk to you about it? So that's one way to just kind of have a new perspective and sort of detach from the emotion of whatever you're going through. Two is maintain a routine like you would at work, because that's something that now a lot of lethargy, a lot of listlessness and all that is coming, because we're getting so used to being at home. You know, you might have your laptop on your bed with you, or you might be, you know, working in your pajamas, and you're not, you know, that discipline that you're giving yourself is important, because it might seem silly to put on makeup when you're at home, but it also gives you a sense of you are dressing for something. Right? You are dressing to take something seriously, and you're giving yourself a workstation that's away from your bedroom or away from the kitchen. Again, changing that from time to time also helps with keeping things interesting and, you know, keeping yourself mentally stimulated. Like if your workstation, if you've been in that one place for 1 month and it's starting to get monotonous, you can actually push that table somewhere else, push it to a new corner, you know, decorate it in some way. So these are silly little things that you can do, but just to keep the situation more interesting to you. Yeah, like Bani said, put a plant on top of it suddenly. Yeah, so that whole dress for work, create that kind of discipline around this, and and keep shifting. And my third is what I just said, mental stimulation. So yeah, keep yourself mentally stimulated. It doesn't have to be all the time on Netflix or on social media, but whatever gives you some joy, at least in the mornings. If you start with that, for me, something that's really working is gratitude. I know that's become like a buzzword, but it really does. You wake up in the morning and you think about 3 things you're grateful for in your life, and at least that puts you in a positive mindset at the start. If you're not feeling grateful, then you need to go and do something to get your mind off a lot of stuff. So then I would say, whether it's reading a book, whether it's listening to some positive music. Music is a great healer. If it's looking at some form of art or whatever, or just getting online with friends, just to, like a 5-minute or 10-minute conversation with each other, just to feel that social connection again. So those are all things that you can do to help yourself in the immediate situation.
Thank you very much, Shanuki. I guess that was wonderful tips from all 3 of y'all, and I think I also believe in most of the stuff that that you're just, and I practice some of them as well. And I think one of the other things we can remember is to smile as well. Smiling really helps, and sharing the love with people really helps. Hugs helps. Even pets, kids, anybody you can hug, that also helps. And I think that's one of the love that we have between each other is what is going to help us. And so just thank you again from all of us from Luminary, for Shanuki, Bani, and Nivendra for coming and giving us so much of wonderful tips for people who really need this help. And also it was a very good share of knowledge for people to understand themselves as well. So Anton, over to you.
Thank you, Numika. Thank you, Bani, Shanuki, and Nivendra for that knowledge share. And it certainly did hold our attention to the very end. With approximately 2.6 billion people around the world in some kind of lockdown situation, we are probably conducting arguably the largest psychological experiment ever. This has already raised concerns if this will result in a secondary epidemic of burnouts and stress-related anxiety the latter half of 2020. Taking action now can certainly mitigate the toxic effects of COVID-19 lockdown and the best way forward. Educating people about the expected psychological impact and the reactions to the trauma, as we rightly heard this morning, and also to make sure people understand that a psychological reaction is normal and that help is available if they do need it. Mental health is a key ingredient of human capital, but has long remained one of the most neglected areas of health. When it comes to offering psychological support to their populations, most countries, as we've seen, are late to react, as they were to the novel coronavirus. However, we would want to, the question I guess is, would we want to risk our emotional well-being on a better late than never reaction? Well, we hope this webinar offered some proactive steps we can take, not only to ensure the physical health and the well-being, but also the emotional well-being of our employees and our loved ones. On that note, a special thanks to H1 team, our technology partners. They are the dream team that makes it happen routinely, going above and beyond the call of duty to make these webinars a success. Kudos, these guys are the best. But tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen, the 5th of May, we will witness the finale of the Reset and Go webinar series. This is the ultimate culmination of the 11 topics, testing resilient leadership in every instance, not just to navigate through today, but to carry forth into tomorrow. Because tomorrow we will feature Nigel Risner, also known as the Chief Zookeeper, and Gordon Treadgold, both globally renowned leadership gurus, sought after turnaround experts, who have worked with and coached some of the best global organizations and their leaders. And these will be our panelists for tomorrow. So continue to watch our social media feed for the links to register. And this is tomorrow, the 5th of May at 11 a.m. Not to be missed as we augment the topics discussed over the past 2 weeks with a view to carving a clear way forward. A quick reminder to all that the video footage from today and other sessions are available on our social media feeds, especially on our YouTube channel. A very good morning. Enjoy the rest of the day. Stay safe, stay productive.